Terrific. Here we go. Hello again, and welcome to another BookTrib Facebook Live author interview brought to you, of course, by BookTrib. And for today's interview, our friends at Penguin Publishing House. My name is Jim Alcon. I'm the editorial director of BookTrib, which is the leading source of book news and reviews. And we're happy that you're here today. We're also happy that our guest is New York Times bestselling author Mark Greaney, who's known for the Gray Man series of novels, for which we will discuss. There's a feature film in development. We will also talk about that. The latest book in his series, which came out recently, is 1 Minute Out. That's from our friends at Berkeley. Mark is also known, by the way, for ghostwriting and co-authoring several Tom Clancy books. Mark, greetings. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me, Jim. Looking forward to this.
So just let me ask you, how have you been dealing with life over these last few crazy months?
I mean, I honestly can't complain. I've been a bartender. I've had a lot of other jobs that I'd be in a lot worse shape. My job I can do from anywhere, and I sit at home and work anyway. I missed a lot of travel, location research I was doing I would be doing for the book I'm working on now. I was going to Dubai and I was going to Berlin, and all that got canceled. So that's unfortunate, but I'm making the best out of it.
Very good. So I know you grew up reading the early works of Tom Clancy. That was you were getting the books as they were coming out, as he was writing them. So I have to ask, how does it feel? It must be quite a rush, when you hear your name and your work being talked about in the same breath as people like Brad Thor and Daniel Silva and, of course, Tom Clancy. How does that feel?
It's surreal, and I feel like there's some sort of a mistake. I have the imposter syndrome, as bad as you can have it. When I was first contacted about working with Tom Clancy, it was just, I felt like it was some sort of a mistake, but then I was given that opportunity, and then I just told myself, you have to adjust your mindset like you've been given this, and now you have to earn what you've already been given. So it's when people refer to me up with some of these other great names that you mentioned, it's a great feeling, but at the same time, it's a little surreal.
So let's talk about how that happened. I mean, you've co-authored, and correct me if I'm wrong, you've co-authored 3 books with him, and you also wrote several books on your own under the Tom Clancy, Jack Ryan brand. How did that whole connection come about?
Yeah, you're right. In 2011, I just turned in the 3rd book in my Gray Man series to my editor, and I was waiting to hear from him about what he thought of it. And to the extent where I reached out to my agent and I said, something's wrong, he usually gets right back with me and tells me he likes it. And this has been, we've been sitting on this for a while. And then it turned out they called me and asked if I would be interested in writing a book with Tom Clancy. And I think they were working on all that stuff as opposed to the Gray Man. And I remember just being horrified of the prospect, but also knowing that it was something I couldn't turn away from. And, Tom Clancy and I had the same editor. So that helped when they wanted a co-author for him. I turned my stuff in relatively on time. And my editor had heard me talk about what a big Clancy fan I was. The first novel, you're sort of alluding to that, the first novel I ever bought on my own was Patriot Games, which was Clancy's 3rd book, I guess.
How does that work exactly when you say I'm co-authoring a book with Tom Clancy? I mean, what is it where do you come in? What do you contribute to that?
I get asked that a lot, and it's always different. There's not one answer so I'm friends with a lot of other people that have done co-authoring, because we're at the book festivals, and we're always put on the same panel about co-authors. So it's me and Ace Atkins and Boyd Morrison and Reed Farrell Coleman and Jamie Trevoletti and several people I'm forgetting, and Mike Madden. And we just all have different relationships with the author we worked with. And in my case, I went up to Baltimore and met with Tom. And then after that, that was 2011. And he passed away, sadly, in 2013, right after we finished the 3rd book. And then, as you said, I ended up doing 4 more before walking away in 2017, I guess.
Got it. So, extending beyond Clancy, you've certainly developed a significant brand of your own in the Gray Man series. What was the origin of that? Where did that whole concept come from?
The origin was failure. I'd written several books and gotten them in front of an agent who I really respected and liked, and gave me the time to give me his feedback. And he didn't think they were good enough, that he thought I could do better. So he there was the character, the Gray Man, in one of the books I wrote called Goon Squad. And there was a subplot that involved these different factions and groups chasing him while he was basically trying to do his main mission. And the man that ended up being my agent and is to this day said, listen, if you wrote a whole nother book and made this gauntlet of people that he has to deal with the central focus, then there you go. And so I just started the book over in 2007 and wrote it in 6 months. And, I felt like, this is the fifth novel that I've written, and none of the others have gotten published, but I felt like I was falling forward each time. I was getting a little bit closer. And so finally it worked.
I was on your website, markgraineybooks.com. There's the plug for it. I thought it was very interesting. You have a tab called the Gray Man World. And I was looking at that, and you can click by country, you can click by weapon, you can click by, it's just, tell our listeners what that's all about.
I enjoy doing research. Obviously, I enjoy the location research. Virtually every book. This is the book I'm writing now is my 20th book, and it's only the second time that I haven't done any travel. I'm not doing any travel for the book, just by necessity. The other time I was having ankle surgery and had to cancel some trips. But I enjoy that aspect of the research, but I also enjoy training with firearms, learning about technology and those things. And so on my website, there is the Gray Man World, and it is specific to the first book, The Gray Man, but it has the different organizations that are involved, the different weapons that are utilized, and different nations and then locations. That book I wrote just with a backpack. I went to Europe for 10 days, but on my vacation time from work, and just got on and off buses and researched the location, researched the novel, and then wrote it from there. So that type of research is important to me, and I just thought it would be a kind of a fun thing for people to look at.
Well, I think for people who might not be familiar, people who are not familiar with your work, or people who are familiar with your work, when you look at that, it just shows the depth of detail that you've gone to create, just you're really getting deep with the characters and the situations and the countries and everything else. Let's talk about 1 Minute Out a little bit. So this is your 9th and most recent Gray Man book. In the story, your ongoing protagonist, Court Gentry, who is, we were talking before, a deadly assassin, an ex-CIA guy, and in fact, the Gray Man, correct? Yes. So he stumbles upon a massive human sex trafficking operation and seeks to rescue the victims and break up the ring. So, my question, given your penchant for research and given the research that needed to take place for this, tell us about, how the research for this storyline, it must have been difficult, and tell us a little bit about it and how the experience in researching it affected you.
Yeah, it was difficult, and I'm embarrassed to say I didn't know what I was getting myself into to some extent. The location research, I had an idea for a story that didn't necessarily involve human trafficking. It just started my hero out in Bosnia while he was doing another mission, and then he found something that sort of led him on this pursuit. And then I decided to go with human trafficking. You research it and you see it's the third largest criminal enterprise in the world. You don't hear about it like you hear about drugs or even weapons or counterfeiting, things like that. It's huge, it's getting worse. And it was also super important in this book that it leads back to the United States, because this isn't just people in far off lands doing really horrible things to people. It's taking place right here. The Jeffrey Epstein situation was known back then, but certainly not the extent. He hadn't been arrested or anything when I researched and wrote this book. So he was part of my research. And actually, the villain in this is a wealthy American financier. But so much has been found, discovered about him and his situation after that. And it all kind of follows the general course of the research that I did on the story.
It seems like too, it's more than just a storyline. I mean, there's, exposing your audience to what's going on here and making them aware.
Yeah, I always say I don't want to get on a soapbox, but if I research something that I'm passionate about and I'll see some bit of data and I just have to sort of like talk about that. And I think that's what I learned from reading Clancy a long time ago. It's like you could read novels and be absolutely entertained and pulled into a story, and also learn something about the world. And that's always been fascinating to me.
I'm always fascinated when an author develops a character and the character comes back again and again, and you've created a series out of the character, and you have manufactured somebody that's going to change and grow, and you keep writing about, and again, your audience thirsts for more, so that's terrific. So let's talk about Court a little bit. We said was at one point a deadly assassin, an ex-CIA man. You first introduced him back in 2009, I think, when the series debuted. How has he evolved as a character from book 1 to book 9? What kind of changes have taken place as you've stuck with him through 9 books?
Yeah, it's been very important for me to not write the same book twice. So there has to be a character arc in each book for the hero, and then also a longer character arc through the season. So you see him develop, and the first book takes place virtually in a 72-hour period. So it's almost like Jason Bourne meets Die Hard or something like that. I mean, it's that level of intensity. So you don't get that much depth of character, and that's build up over time. You see his relationship with some people that come in and out of the series change as he goes. You see him mature quite a bit. He is maybe a little less sure of himself now, because he questions some of the decisions he's made in ways that I didn't have him doing in earlier books. So the psychology of it is super interesting to me. And he's somebody, I've got a lot more ideas. The book I'm working on now, I'm trying to determine how I want it to end, his relationship with another character. I don't really know where it's going to go from there, but I want it to end with some punch here, and that's just fun for me to work on.
And a character that spreads through 9 books. I mean, the character is not the same age.
Yeah.
Every book a little. And I think I read somewhere you said you were on a roll for a while where you were writing 2 books a year.
Yeah, I did it for 10 years. Yeah.
So even if you try to balance Court out and say, okay, so every 6 months or a year, whatever it is, he's that much older. So now maybe he's a little bit more mature, or at least his head is in a different place than it might have been 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, I don't specify I did in the first book, and then you're like, oh, they want a series, okay. And so I don't really go that much into his age and the amount of time that's passed between books. But some authors do. That Daniel Silva, who's Gabriel Allon, has aged with the years, and I think he's obviously a brilliant author, and it's very well done. Mine, I am just being a little bit vague about it. It's not that integral. Each story is a self-contained unit, so I don't think about it that too much. No one really complains that James Bond isn't 91 years old or whatever he would be if he was late 30s when Dr. No came out. So yeah, but I do try and make the story logically follow the other novels in the books.
All right, but there's the beauty of fiction, right?
Yeah,
you don't have to specify what his age is, and even if you're not following the whole series, I would imagine people could read one novel at a time and still get the complete, not feel like they've missed anything, unless they want to go back.
Each book is completely standalone, and that's very important to me, because as a reader, I've picked up books before and had no idea what was going on, and felt like I missed 1,000 pages that happened before page 1 of the book. So I'm always thinking of the reader's experience, and that's something that's really important to me, to make it a standalone.
We talk to a lot of authors a lot of times that have series, and they're always trying to wrestle with, does it make sense to talk about and promote the most recent one, even if the audience isn't that familiar with me? Should we go back to square one? So we're constantly wrestling. And again, if the books hold by themselves, then that's not really an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. There are series that I think you should start, from the beginning, because the author has chosen to have things build in a certain way. But each one of my books, there are references to events that happened in other books, but it's not integral to the plot of the book.
So how much of Mark Greaney is in the character Court Gentry? Or some other inspiration? And again, we said he's a deadly assassin, so you don't have to admit that you're a deadly assassin, unless you want, unless we want some breaking news here. He's a smart aleck, and that might be the extent of. I mean, I feel like my value system and his are the same. I feel like if I did some of the things he did, I would second guess myself a lot, and I like to put that in there. So he's not
a superhero. He has a lot of vulnerabilities, which I guess we all do.
Yeah.
So in that way, he's the same. I initially got the inspiration from him. I was in El Salvador going to language school in Guatemala, and I was just spending a weekend in El Salvador, and I was just at some bar, and there an American came in, and he had a beard and a little bit longer hair, and he didn't look like the other Americans I saw. He wasn't a surfer. This was on the beach. He wasn't a language student like I was, and he just looked like a tough guy. And I just created, as sitting there in the bar, I just created a backstory for this guy, that he was ex-CIA, but he's living off grid because there's a sanction against him from the agency. And I think I started the book the next day.
So, in 1 minute out, this is the first book in the series that's written in the first person through court. So why the change?
I like doing things that are different, and I like the first person in general if it's done well. Nelson DeMille writes great first person books. Lee Child did a couple of Reacher books in first person.
Did you think there was something more about the character that could be exposed if you hear him saying it?
Yeah, this book lent itself to that, because for large swaths of this book, he is on his own, where usually he has not a sidekick, but somebody else. And there's a little bit of that here, but for large periods of the book, he's on his own. And I wanted his decision making to be shown, not told. I mean, it's told, but it's told through his inner monologue. And I think it's immediate, and I think it works for this book. But the book I'm writing now, book 10 in the series, is back in third person.
Got it. So, we talked a little bit about research and the human trafficking element, but research, I think in general, is such an integral part of your books, with details and authenticity just really being crucial. And I understand, and we've talked before, that, you've been to a number of countries, you've trained alongside military and law enforcement in the use of firearms, battlefield medicine, close range combative tactics. Tell us a little bit about, the research process, and if you have maybe an anecdote or two of something unusual that happened while you were doing all these, incredible things.
Yeah, it's the one thing about this job that I pinch myself about is the opportunities I get. I'm standing on a Navy destroyer in San Diego, and being sort of asking questions and having people look up to see if something's classified before they answer me. Same with the Pentagon and other places I've been. That's an amazing thing. And the firearms research I do started just to get the guns right and to get the knowledge of that. And it started before the first book. But then it became more about the guys that I would meet in the team rooms or the bunkhouses of these schools I would go to, and really getting a lot of atmospherics from the people that are special forces or SWAT or that sort of thing. Anecdote wise, I've got the opportunity a few times to do some SWAT shoot houses, like SWAT schools, where you play the opposition force. And they give you a rifle and a mask and tell you where to stick the towel down your pants so the bullets don't hurt as bad. And then they put you in a dark room, and then you wait for the SWAT team to come in and try and kill you, and which they do. And so I've done that several times, and that's as intense as anything I've done. You actually fire a real bullet that has a paint cartridge in it, but it hurts as bad as a real bullet.
I would also imagine, just, as well as the research for specific storylines, you probably have to stay abreast of current events and the media and culture and everything that's happening based on the nature of your books, right?
Absolutely. My father was I live in Memphis, Tennessee, and my father was the news director of the NBC affiliate here in Memphis. So I grew up around the news. I also grew up with books, mostly nonfiction, until I got older and discovered Clancy. But I got a degree in political science and international relations. For the longest time, I didn't get published till I was in my early 40s. So for the longest time, I said I didn't do anything with my college degree, and suddenly it becomes part and parcel with my job in a way that I never could have imagined. But you have to keep abreast of things, because I write within the real world. I'm totally fascinated by people that can write fantasy or sci-fi and that sort of stuff. But I am very much rooted in the real world in my writing, and like to learn about it, make little twists for artistic flair here and there.
but I guess people are going to pick up if something, say this isn't quite the way it happened, or that's interesting the way he's interpreting this event. So I'm sure, on the one hand, it's great to just say it's all going to be fantasy. On the other hand, you have to say, I really better be true to the reader because they're pretty astute and are going to pick up anything that might not seem accurate.
Absolutely right. And you do get really scrutinized, especially when some people have a very specific piece of knowledge. In one of my more recent books, I got something wrong with microbiology. And I believe every microbiologist that speaks English has contacted me, which is great. It means a lot of people are reading my books, but
right.
But it just shows you the level of scrutiny you get, and that's part of the game. And you're going to screw things up, and you do your best.
So you've done all the research. Let's talk about the writing process a little bit. Do you have everything, and your plots are very intricate. So do you have everything mapped out in advance? Do you have a rough idea? Do you ad lib along the way? How does that work?
I wish I had it all mapped out. I think my life and brain would be so much better, but it is, I have a very rough idea, and I don't know how I'm getting from one place to another or any of that stuff, but just in a general sense, some key things I want to happen. And then I start writing, and I will go back and kind of make a little outline over little sections, just to keep myself organized about where I'm going and where the characters are going. But even in the book I'm doing now, I'm 75,000 words in, and there's a lot of connections that have to be made that I don't know how they're going to be made, or I really don't know what the end result's going to be yet. So I will learn that on the day. So it's really a hybrid, but it's messy. Nobody wants to see the sausage being made, but people like the sausage. So I'm the one that sees the sausage made, unfortunately.
That's so funny. My wife just used that expression because I think it's in one of the songs from the show Hamilton, and we were talking about that.
Yeah.
And she said to me, do you think the show is where that expression originated, or was that an expression beforehand and they incorporated it into the song? But you just used it. So
I've used it for a long time. I've heard it for a long time, and it works really well when you talk about writing, because there's some ugly aspects of the copy editing and all this other stuff you wouldn't want the world to see, but they seem to enjoy the finished product.
So what do you enjoy most? What's your favorite part of the writing process, if there's a way you can talk about that? Or sometimes, is there a particular scene that you look forward to? Say, boy, I'm really going to, I'm glad that I'm at that point. Anything?
Yeah, so I'm known for action, and I don't spend that much time thinking about, planning the action scenes in advance. I'm more fascinated by and drawn to dialogue and the tension between characters, whatever the tension is, if it's positive tension or negative tension. I want the relationships to be something people can identify with, and something that kind of moves the story forward. So I will actually find a lot of my story just by having my characters talk to one another, which sounds kind of strange, but I will just sort of start in the middle of a scene that I don't really know where it's going, but I know I'm going to have these two people talking to each other, and through the tension in the dialogue, I come up with a lot of the stuff that ends up being really important parts of the book.
I like the fact that everything is not mapped out, and you're saying, I'm not quite sure where they're going.
Yeah.
I can imagine you waking up this morning thinking, or at a given morning and saying, how am I going to connect point A to point B? But that's, I guess, part of the fun of it all.
I guess it's fun when it's over and you can talk about it, but when you're doing it, no, I literally will lay in bed and I'll be like, okay, you're just sitting here, man. You've got to be thinking about how Zoya is going to get, out of the United Kingdom and into here. And,
right.
and I get mad at myself for, like going off topic when it's time to work on a book. That's where my brain needs to be all the time.
What do you find is the most challenging aspect of writing?
At this stage, it's keeping it fresh and different. There's only so many ways one man can follow someone else down a street covertly or whatever. And having written 20 books, that gets tougher and tougher to do. You pick all your low-hanging fruit when you write your early books, all the ideas you've had your whole life and things, and then so you have to go out and generate new information. So for this book, I'm doing tons of research on Iran and the United Arab Emirates and European terrorism and those sorts of things. And I will incorporate that in the story. But in the old days, I could just sort of sit down with my laptop and write 4,000 or 5,000 words in a day, because I've always had this idea about, rockets being turned into nuclear missiles or something like that. So I'll just bang that out for a while. You run out of those, and then you have to like do all your research for every page.
No, I get it. So let's talk. So there's a film adaptation of The Gray Man in the works. Where does that stand? How's that process going?
It is still in development. There is a script that I really like. Sony owns the rights to it. Um, I'm super happy with the script. I'm happy with the people that are circling the project now to either direct or star in it. But I've been at this for a long time, so I have very until they start filming, it's not real. Obviously, I got paid, and that was real. And interestingly enough, just last month, I sold another original work to Sony Pictures. This original audio drama I wrote for Audible that hasn't even been recorded yet because of COVID. They haven't been able to get the actors together, but that sold to Sony Pictures with Michael Bay directing. And so I have two projects in Hollywood right now.
Very exciting. And
Yeah.
you know, we talked to a number of authors whose books have been converted to film, and sometimes when we ask them how it's going, it works both ways. Sometimes they're thrilled, they love the direction, they love the vision. Sometimes, you know, and again, often they've laid back and saying, hey, making the film is not my role. You know,
Yeah.
I gave them the concept. And other times they can say, well, this is, you know, I wouldn't do it that way, you know,
Right.
or why are you changing this? Why are you changing that? I guess you haven't gotten to that point yet, or have you, with the script?
Well, I've read, Sony's had several scripts written, and I've read them, and there's things that I like and don't like. The one that I think is in play right now is the one probably I'm most happy with, and so that's all good. But I'm in that camp of the book is what I wrote. That was my impression of the story, and I hope the film comes out because it'll be a great advertisement to get people to read the book. And if you
Right.
read the book, it'll be a different experience. There'll be a lot of similarities and then some differences. So I read one script that was written for The Gray Man years ago, and I thought if they had changed the name of this and I went to the theater and saw it, I'd think it was a cool movie, but I would not even recognize it as being my own story. It was literally that different. So I can see authors saying these things legitimately, frustrated or really excited. But to me, it would be an amazing promotion for my books.
And just the fact that someone has taken your story and said, this is fantastic, we're going to convert it to this other medium. And if we, the experts in the film industry, think maybe this should happen or that should happen, I mean, sometimes, you might be cringing, but they probably know how to make movies, so they know what they're doing.
Just about, but then you see the big flops. Like really good authors that I know have had movies that just didn't do well. There's a million reasons a movie won't do well, that has nothing to do with the writing or even the screenplay. But it's a crapshoot either way, I guess.
Right. No, I hear you. So I just wanted to ask, what's up next for you? Obviously, you're in the process of the next book. You've got the film projects going on. What's the timetable on the new book?
I am. If my editor's watching this, I don't really want to answer that question. I'm just kidding. No, the book should be turned in sometime in July. It is called Relentless, and it's the 10th book in the series. That's what I'm working on now. When I'm finished with that, I will start work on. I had a book that came out last year that I co-authored with a then active duty Marine Lieutenant Colonel Rip Rawlings, and we had a book called Red Metal that came out last year, and we're going to be doing the sequel to that. So what I will do is when I finish Relentless, I'll work on Red Metal 2 for 6 months or so, and then I'll start working on Gray Man 11, and then I'll finish Red Metal 2 after that. So there's going to be some bouncing around, but I've been doing it for a long time, so I keep telling myself I can do it one more year.
Very good. Well, it's been fun talking with you, Mark. Again, Mark Greaney, we've been talking with 1 minute out in the Gray Man series. I want to thank our friends at Penguin Publishing Group. And until next time, thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon. This is Jim Alcon, and stay safe. Thanks again, Mark.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
Great.